When the Refugee Convention was signed, it conferred protection on some 2 million people in Europe. According to analysis by Nick Timothy and Carl Williams for the Centre for Policy Studies, it now confers the notional right to move to another country upon at least 780 million people. It is therefore incumbent upon politicians and thought leaders to ask whether the Refugee Convention and the way it has come to be interpreted through our courts is fit for our modern age or in need of reform. Article 1 of the Convention defines the term refugee as applying to those who, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion, cannot safely reside in the country of their nationality. Elsewhere, the Convention speaks of life or freedom being threatened. I think most members of the public would recognise those fleeing a real risk of death, torture, oppression or violence as being in need of protection. However, as case law has developed, what we have seen in practice is an interpretive shift away from persecution in favour of something more akin to a definition of discrimination. And there has been a similar shift away from a well-founded fear towards a credible or plausible fear, the practical consequence of which has been to expand the number of those who may qualify for asylum and to lower the threshold for doing so. Let me be clear, there are vast swathes of the world where it is extremely difficult to be gay or to be a woman. Where individuals are being persecuted, it is right that we offer sanctuary. But we will not be able to sustain an asylum system if, in effect, simply being gay or a woman or fearful of discrimination in your country of origin is sufficient to qualify for protection. Article 31 of the Refugee Convention makes clear that it is intended to apply to individuals coming directly from a territory where their life was threatened. It also states that where people are crossing borders without permission, they should present themselves without delay to the authorities and must show good cause for any illegal entry. The UK, along with many others, including America, interpret this to mean that people should seek refuge and claim asylum in the first safe country that they reach. But NGOs and others, including the UN Refugee Agency, contest this. The status quo, where people are able to travel through multiple safe countries and even reside in safe countries for years, while they pick and choose their preferred destination to claim asylum, is absurd and unsustainable. Nobody entering the UK by boat from France is fleeing imminent peril. None of them have good cause for illegal entry. The vast majority have passed through multiple other safe countries and in some instances have resided in safe countries for several years. There is a strong argument that they should cease to be treated as refugees during their onward movement. There are also many whose journeys originate from countries that the public would consider to be manifestly safe, like Turkey or Albania or India. In these instances, most are simply economic migrants, gaming the asylum system to their advantage. In Europe, we've added, through the European Convention on Human Rights, additional human rights laws. The global asylum framework is a promissory note that the West cannot fulfill. We have created a system of almost infinite supply, incentivizing millions of people to try their luck, knowing full well that we have no capacity to meet more than a fraction of the demand. Tragically, the ease with which this system can be gamed by those that don't really need it means it is the most vulnerable, women, children, those without the money to pay people smugglers, and those not fit enough to make arduous journeys that lose out. In the UK, roughly 70% of those arriving illegally on small boat are men aged under 40. This is a hypocritical position for the West to maintain, and by creating a market for people smuggling, it is leading to considerable human suffering. So why has the international community so far collectively failed to explore any serious reform of the global asylum framework? I think there are two main reasons. The first is simply that it's very hard to renegotiate these instruments. If you think getting 27 EU member states to agree is difficult, try getting agreement at the United Nations. The second is much more cynical. The fear of being branded a racist or illiberal. Any attempt to reform the Refugee Convention will see you smeared as anti-refugee. Similar epithets are hurled at anyone who suggests reform of the ECHR or its court in Strasbourg. I reject the notion that a country cannot be expected to respect human rights if it is not signed up to an international human rights organisation. As if the UK doesn't have a proud history of human rights dating back to Magna Carta, and the ECHR is all that is holding us back from becoming Russia. America, Canada, New Zealand, and Japan seem to manage just fine. None of this is particularly novel, nor should it be particularly controversial. As Home Secretary, Theresa May called for Britain to leave the ECHR. And it was Conservative Party policy under Michael Howard to leave the Refugee Convention. I'm merely advocating for reform. Now, while the underlying framework is both a contributing factor to the problem and a barrier to certain fixes, some countries have been more successful in tackling illegal migration than others. Australia had to cope with two major waves of illegal maritime migration across the Pacific in the last 2 decades. In the last wave, before they stopped the crossings, more than 52,000 unauthorised maritime arrivals and around 1,100 deaths at sea were recorded between 2008 and 2014. Operation Sovereign Borders saw migrant boats intercepted, and then those on board were either returned whence they had travelled or taken to immigration detention centres in third countries. There were some 400 illegal boat crossings in 2013, the year the operation was enacted. Within a year, the problem was eliminated. Denmark, between 2015 and 2016, announced a range of measures intended to make their asylum system significantly less attractive as a destination for illegal migration. The result was a reduction in claims from 21,000 in 2015 to 6,000 in 2016 and 1,500 in 2020. For every one asylum seeker that arrived in Denmark in 2021, 3 arrived in Sweden on a per capita basis. So unilateral and bilateral solutions and policies of deterrence can and do work. This is the route the UK has chosen to go down. In 2022, some 12,000 Albanians entered the UK illegally via small boat. In response, we strengthened how we worked with Albania, including improved data sharing, closer operational working, new expedited returns arrangements, and financial support. These measures have seen the number of Albanian small boat arrivals fall by 90% so far during 2023. We also work closely with France. Last year, the Prime Minister signed a historic bilateral agreement to deepen our cooperation in combating illegal migration. That included significant investment to increase frontline staffing and policing levels in northern France, better real-time intelligence and data sharing, supported by embedded UK officers, and improved intelligence cooperation to increase disruptions, arrests, and prosecutions. This sort of cooperation is necessary, but not sufficient in terms of results. Overall crossings are down more than 20% so far this year, compared with 2022. The system that we are working to deliver through our Legal Migration Act is one that, within the limitations of the broader rights-based framework, says that the only route to asylum in the UK must be a safe and legal route. Anyone who enters the UK illegally will be deemed inadmissible to our asylum system, and following assessment will be detained and swiftly removed to their home country if that's safe, or to a safe third country if not. In 2021, we signed our groundbreaking migration and economic development partnership with Rwanda. Under this agreement, Rwanda will accept physical and legal responsibility for illegal migrants relocated from the UK and look after all their needs while their claims are considered, with a full package to support their integration into Rwandan society. We always knew that our partnership would be challenged in court, and we remain confident that the UK Supreme Court will uphold the legality of the scheme later this year, enabling us to start putting it into operation. While our political opponents, NGOs and others dismissed the partnership as an immoral gimmick when it was first announced, it is striking how many countries run by governments of varying political hues have now expressed in public and in private conversations their support for this model. Many are now pursuing variations of their own. The UK will continue to prioritise policies of deterrence and border hardening alongside the maintenance of safe and legal routes. At the same time, we will look to build consensus for more fundamental reform of the asylum framework at the international level. The goal for reform must be to embed certain principles in the global asylum framework. Deterring illegal migration must be an aim. Countries must have a say in what volume of refugees they are capable of resettling each year. Support and protection should, to the fullest extent possible, be rendered in neighbouring safe countries where it is most efficient to deliver and able to reach those that need it most. The only route to resettlement should be via safe and legal routes. People must claim asylum in the first safe country they reach. The definition of who qualifies for protection must be tightened, and policies of externalisation, such as our partnership with Rwanda, must be recognised as appropriate. I don't accept the false choice between acting unilaterally or even bilaterally to protect one's border and solving this problem through multilateral cooperation. International cooperation is essential if we are to find enduring solutions to the challenges of global migration and deliver an asylum framework fit for the modern age. But nations cannot simply sit on their hands while a reform process plays out. It is right that they act in their national interest. I have, in recent weeks, been meeting with fellow interior ministers in Europe. I will continue doing so in the coming months and hope to bring together partners to a forum where we can begin discussing some of the matters that I've touched on today. Is the Refugee Convention in need of reform? Would a revised global asylum framework work, and how would it look? How can we better balance national rights and human rights so that the latter do not undermine national sovereignty? Could the ECHR be more transparent and accountable in how it interprets human rights and give greater power to nation states to make arguments and present evidence? What are the appropriate criteria for being labelled a refugee these days in the 21st century? How can we stop human rights laws being gamed by smugglers? Are we delivering safe and legal routes in an efficient and effective manner? And while we may have different views as to the solutions, I hope we can at least agree on one thing, that we are living in a new world bound by outdated legal models. It's time that we acknowledge that.